Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, October 31st, and I hope you all are having a very spooky Halloween. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we have no tricks, just treats. Some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we'll head over to Allen, where he meets with Justin Stouter, CTO of Firemon, to talk about his appointment as the newest CTO of Firemon. Then, Alan will speak with Rickard Carlson, CEO of Detectify, to discuss the advantages of implementing both a shift left and right approach. Then, we go to Open Source Summit Europe, where Mike met with Hillier Carter, Vice President of Research for the Linux Foundation, as Hillary explains why the consortium wants organizations to share their open source software adoption stories. Also at Open Source Summit Europe, Mike spoke with Gab Columbro, Executive Director of the Finos Foundation, where Gab explains why the Linux Foundation is creating a division dedicated to addressing European open source issues. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of our upcoming webinars. Next up, we're airing episode 2 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Then, to wrap up this broadcast, we have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike interviews Chad McDonald, Chief of Staff and CISO for Radiant Logic, as Chad explains how an economic downturn will make maintaining cybersecurity even more challenging as staff reductions increase insider threats. Then, Mike interviews Erez Barak, General Manager and Vice President of Engineering for Sumo Logic, as Erez explains why the key to reliability is observability in modern DevOps environments. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for October 31st. First up, after months of legal battles, Elon Musk officially bought Twitter. Last Thursday night, Musk closed his $44 billion acquisition of Twitter. After becoming private, Musk reportedly fired several top-level executives, including the current Twitter CEO. This story started all the way back in April, when Musk originally started making plans to buy Twitter. As far as Twitter is concerned now, though, it is not clear what his plans are to do with it in the future, so we have to wait and see how this all turns out. Next up, Amazon was one of the latest companies to report weaker than expected revenue. While the company returned to profitability this quarter, revenue forecasts for the quarter were not met. Amazon, alongside other retailers, have been feeling pessimistic about the holiday shopping season and have been offering more and more deals to clear out inventories and lure in frugal shoppers. Additionally, the retail giant's earnings follow a similar trend to other big tech companies, such as Google, Microsoft, and Meta, which have all reported drops in revenues and profits as the economy becomes tougher with higher inflation and rising interest rates. In other news, Ford has said that it will be disbanding its autonomous vehicle company, Argo AI. Ford executives said that last week they do not see a path to profitability on fully autonomous cars and will be switching to partially automated driver assist systems. Ford has said that it would take billions of dollars to put self-driving cars on the streets, and with the waning enthusiasm of investors, this was not a feasible reality for them. This shows the difficulty of making autonomous vehicles a reality. However, with the customer support for driver-assisted systems still there, Ford still considers this technology worth investing in. Next up, the U.S. Agriculture Department announced that it is making $759 million of grants and loans available to rural communities to access high-speed internet. Part of the $65 billion push for high-speed internet in last year's infrastructure law, 49 communities across 24 states will receive the grants that will provide much-needed broadband services to these rural areas. The grants were revealed last week, with the Agricultural Department noting how rural areas having access to high-speed internet helps them access telemedicine, tap into economic opportunity, and work with precision agriculture. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a ransomware report that shows the sheer extent of ransomware attacks. According to the report, 27 variants of ransomware carried out 455 attacks over the third quarter, with 40% of those being from the variant Lockbit 3.0. This just shows how any organization can end up struggling with operational security. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at Sigstore's announcement of a free digital signing software becoming generally available via the cloud. This new cloud service will make it possible for developers to cryptographically sign artifacts, as well as verify that the components used to build applications are secure. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article looking at how Release Hub announces new feature to spin up application environments in the cloud based on how Docker Compose files are configured on a developer's laptop. Release Hub has said that the goal is to remove the friction that developers currently encounter when spinning up application environments. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
Coding is changing the world, making a difference in the world.
We take anyone, any adult, and help them become the best version of themselves and become a software engineer.
At Techstrong Group, we've undertaken to meet this challenge with our Engineering the Change Scholarship.
My career has completely changed to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Full $10,000 scholarship to one winner to attend the intense software development course at Boca Code.
I was just ready to be a software engineer.
So Donald is another story.
Right now it's kind of like, I don't know.
Honestly, it's starting to scare me a little bit.
Roller coaster of understanding something one moment and then feeling lost the next.
If you change the capitalization of a file name, you are going to your whole project.
At the end of it, you're gonna be a really good family.
We call Stephanie like the silent ninja. As much as he's struggling, Donald really, really wants this.
My house burned down twice.
The biggest thing I'm struggling with definitely is time.
That's pretty cool that I've been able to expand my mind to be able to accept different ways of doing something.
My only option is to succeed.
Boca Code, we do it!
Highs definitely getting started. Lows would be Darius jokes.
We told all of them that this is the hardest thing they would have to go through.
All of our graduates are absolute stars.
Boca Code!
Who will graduate and become a software engineer?
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. You know, for those who watch this regularly or know me, I've been in the information security, cybersec as we call it today, marketplace for 25 years. One of the first companies I met and people I met in cybersecurity early on was the good folks at Fishnet Security, as they were called then. It was Gary Fish and his CTO, Jody Brazel. And Jody and Gary, Jody founded, Gary helped, I guess, Firemon become a company. It was actually spun out from Fishnet. It's got to be 18, 17, something like that years ago, 16 maybe. And ever since then, I've been a Firemon fan. I followed Jody and Firemon. Back then, there wasn't really a cloud, but what was happening was people were adding firewalls like mad. And the idea of being able to manage policies across firewalls and routers was not an easy task. It was beyond not easy. It was impossible. And Firemon quickly became the leader in what became known as security policy management. And if I have the initials wrong, I apologize. Fast forward, Firemon has gone through a lot of changes during these times. They've acquired some great technology and some great people with acquisitions in Lumina and DisruptOps and others. Have a cloud aspect. They still have that core security policy management, but that mission's changed too. Anyway, we haven't had a chance to have a catch up with Firemon in a long time, so I'm really happy to introduce you all today to Justin Stouter. And Justin's going to tell us all about his newly appointed role as well as his background. Justin, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Alan, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, that was a long-winded, short introduction to you and Firemon. But why don't you take it from here now, man? Tell us, give us a little bit of the Justin story as well as, your take on Firemon.
Absolutely. So thanks again for having me. Really excited to be on the show. Firemon, as you know, has been in this space for quite some time. And it's an interesting correlation because when Firemon was getting started was when I was starting my career in technology and software development and operations. And so I've got a 20-year career of building software companies and software teams all over the globe and have the incredible opportunity to lead the technology organization at this storied company. And you're right. We've been around for quite some time and recently seemingly kind of caught up in all these changes within the marketplace. That said, we find ourselves at a unique inflection point now. And as I'm sure you're aware, companies across the globe are asking for consolidation. They want fewer vendor touch points. And what that requires is for vendors to be in a place where they have multiple solutions. And as Jody's leadership, as the board would have it, we provide that now. So what my role is taking, yes, our NSPM solution and continuing to push it forward and lead the edge, but then also take our cybersecurity asset management tool with Lumina and our cloud security operations tool with DisruptOps and bring those all together as a cohesive solution. That's where you'll find Firemon technology right now.
Absolutely. And Justin, I mean, part of the reason you're on today is you were recently announced as CTO of, why don't you explain what your position is? I don't want to mess it up.
Sure, absolutely. I think, Jody's a brilliant leader, just a fantastic technologist. And as I was leading the Lumeta division, the general manager and vice president of that organization, we would have fantastic conversations about what's the future look like and how do we bring this together cohesively, and just naturally kind of transpired. And we need a CTO. And the conversation went from there, that my background and my understanding of the space just made for a really healthy fit in bringing all these portfolios together in a meaningful way. Meaningful in that not just to satisfy what we're trying to accomplish, but the needs of our customers. So what does that look like? Well, the NSPM space has long been, and I'll say this at the risk of catching flack from Jody, mired in the on-premise application. Well, a lot of our customers are no longer exclusively on-premise. As you know, everyone seemingly, besides maybe the government, and even some government customers are starting to stretch out into the cloud. We need to adjust to that. We need to actually lead that. So we're looking at what is NSPM in the cloud.
Justin, let me stop you right there.
I apologize. But you know what? We got a lot of folks here who are DevOps and cloud people, and they don't even know what NSPM stands for.
Right.
We can't throw acronyms out there without telling them. So network security policy management.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. And so, taking that and understanding where our customers likely heading and making sure we're staying one step ahead of them. That's where DisruptOps comes in, because DisruptOps was leading and still is how to interact from a security operations posture with all of the cloud providers. So we're leaning heavily on that as we talk about integration. And then as you think about asset discovery, and then asset management, which is a huge space. It's exploding. Lumeta was one of the original founders of that all the way back in 2000 from Bell Labs for some 3-letter agencies with the government. Pairing that together is what I believe a fantastic opportunity to what we can provide to customers. You sit down and just say, I'm not just about network security policy management. That's just one slice. I also have cloud assets. I also have security operations that are running wild. Can you cohesively, with intent, simplify all of that and help me secure my security operations? that's the unique position that Firemon finds itself in.
Absolutely. You know what? For what it's worth, my 2 cents, lose the N.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we say network security policy management, people sort of, focus in on classic network security, firewall, router, moat and castle, perimeter, that kind of thing. Really, to me, Firemon today is about security policy management. And in order to do security policy management, number one, you got to know what you got, what your assets are. And in today's world, those assets may be on the LAN, on a WAN, anywhere, in the cloud, and all of the above. So, number one, you got to be able to you got to know what is your surface, what do you got, right?
Right.
Number two, you got to decide what policies do I put in place that I can manage to protect this real estate. Real estate's a bad word. To protect this surface, right?
Right.
And some of those might be kind of that traditional network stuff, because there's still a lot of firewalls out there, still a lot of LANs out there. Some of it may be cloud, kind of the stuff, that Disrupt Ops does with guardrails and helping to, keep things policy managed there. Some of it may be remote, people working from anywhere with everything coming on the network. And what's our policy management for those types of devices?
That's right.
To me, that's the power of this Firemon story.
That's right. Yeah. And one of the things you touched on, Alan, that's absolutely true, both in market data and with our customers, is the explosion of IoT and OT. It's a factor of a magnitude right now in the marketplace. And so I don't want to sound too pitchy, but we just are 2 weeks away from releasing a new version of Lumeta that is focused on IoT and OT. But to your point, what we're finding with customers is they don't know what they're supposed to be managing. And when you're talking about security policy management and asking how many firewalls, how many policies, and they don't know, what better, tag-along tool than an asset discovery device or asset discovery solution? So we're finding a ton of power between bringing those two things together and leveraging them to secure your real estate.
Absolutely, yeah. And this has always been kind of a holy grail, right? The Lumeta story. Look, I remember Big Fix and IBM buying them, right? I'm sure you do. And again, that was the same sort of notion is, hey, let's discover what's on our network so we can put in policies to manage the security for these devices. Now, you mentioned IoT, OT, things, connected things. The numbers I see is 55 billion devices by 2025 or something like that, right? That's about 8 for every single person on Earth when you think about it, and I mean that's daunting. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, we were talking to a mid-level manufacturing company recently, and we asked them to estimate the number of devices under management, and there's a manufacturing business, and the gentleman responded with 13 million. And that's small SMB, just exploding. And those are attack vectors. They really are.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
But if you're not aware of them, how can you secure them? You can't manage what you can't see. And so
there's more too, I think.
Justin, when I used to think about connected things, it was like SCADA stuff, right? And that was scary because they're in, non-important stuff like nuclear power plants. But they were relatively simple devices. They were binary, yes, no kind of devices. Today's things have real software on them.
That's right.
Right? We're doing a DevOps experience. Annually, we do this event called DevOps Experience, virtual event. But this year, there's 3 tracks. One of the tracks is the DevOps of things, including the security of them. Because what's happening is these things increasingly are updatable via the web, right? They're not like dumb devices. They're connected and they're updatable. They have enough headroom to put some software in there and to update it. They have more sophisticated software running on them. There's a lot of great stuff on these connected devices now. They're smarter. There's machine learning going on. There's all kinds of, data syncing going on. This is a security problem, right?
Right.
I mean, these dumb devices are getting smarter. That means our security needs to get smarter.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right.
That's a big mission, man.
It is. It is. We're real excited about being able to provide that to
So you said
future
next
customers.
week, maybe? I don't want to get you in trouble. But soon.
Yeah, the end of the month, we're releasing 4.6 within Lumeta. And it has all kinds of new features, integrations with other tools. But one of the key, table stake was BACnet and Modbus support, which are the two main protocols within healthcare, manufacturing, IoT, OT.
Excellent. So we'll look for that at the end of the month. Let's talk firewalls a little bit, Justin.
Sure.
People, I think people are sleeping on it a little bit, but I'm sure if anyone Firemon has, it's still a huge amount of devices out there.
It's massive. And it's growing every single day. We get requests for ones we haven't even heard of. They're tier 2 or tier 3 or even tier 4. But Alan, I love that you asked me that question because we just did a refocus of the organization and we carved off an entire network security engineering team that is exclusively focused on tier 1 devices. Because what we're finding is as the checkpoints of the world go broader, companies aren't keeping up. And the way to keep up is to pinpoint actual people to a vendor. And that's our tact right now. We have a whole team of 10 people who are exclusively focused on tier 1 device support. We're doing training, we're doing partner relationships, everything we can to go as deep as possible, because we are finding that that's a huge contention point in the marketplace is, have you picked up the most recent release from Checkpoint? Can you validate and verify that? We have to be able to assert that for our customers and our future prospects.
Absolutely, man. I just, and again, Justin, you've been in security a long time. We're always focused on the next cool thing. And when we focus on the next cool thing, we kind of lose focus on some really bread and butter things like firewall policy management, for instance, right? We're also busy about cloud and guardrails and IAM and the access control in the cloud and all that. Hey, man, when we look at people coming in with phishing, and we see this with DLP, right? DLP was dead. No one spoke about DLP for a long time. All of a sudden, DLP's back on the radar, right? People are saying, wait a second, we got to stop this data from getting sucked out of our network. It's not necessarily getting sucked out of the cloud. It's getting sucked right out of our network.
Right.
And we could still stop it there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So honestly, that's the unique position that Firemon finds itself in. That's why I'm so excited to be here, is that we're pivoting and posturing from a place of strength, and that's policy management. If you're talking to a tool in our space, a competitor, you should be asking them, truly, not just to compare against Firemon, but because you're interested in securing your operations, you should be asking them, okay, great, but what are you doing about asset discovery and asset management? Because my network's growing. What are you doing about securing the cloud? Because we're starting to talk about that. We're the only company in this space that can assert a position of strength in all three of those vectors.
Absolutely. So I know we spoke off camera, and I don't know. So the Disrupt Ops, which is a big part of the cloud, has a CTO there, Brandy.
That's right.
And your CTO kind of the rest of the piece of it. Let's talk a little bit how that kind of works together.
Sure. I'll give you a perfect example with this. And I know I keep going back to it. We're in release stride for our policy management tool right now. It's going to be after this next Lumeta release, but that's a great question. So Disrupt Ops has expressed and delivered an incredible aptitude to connecting to cloud assets and then actually going out and pulling all of that back. And so what we did with Lumeta in this current release is we leveraged that API. And now when you have Lumeta, you can connect directly to that DisruptOps API and go out to AWS and pull every single asset down and right back into your asset management tool. So that's the type of collaboration I'm talking about. It's exceptionally strong across it. And that's not easy to do. But we're finding great success in that right now.
I love it, man. Hey, Justin, where can people... Well, it's obviously firemon.com, right? F-I-R-E-M, just like it says behind your...
Yes.
And they can stay on top of that. What about, I assume you guys will be at like RSA conference or some of the... It's not till April.
Yes. We just had, actually Jody is heading out to Germany first of next week. We will be at RSA. I don't have a list of the conferences between that and RSA, but I know we'll be heading out. I encourage people, if they want to interact with me, to head out to my LinkedIn, Justin Stouter. Look me up there. That'd be a great place to find me directly. I want to talk more about what's going on at Firemon.
All right. Hey, Justin, now that you're there, you got this position, I expect you to be a regular on here. So
I'd love to be. It's my pleasure, Alan. Thank you for having me.
No, stay in touch. Justin Stouter, newly appointed CTO at Firemon here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break and then we'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. Our next guest is a new first-time guest on our show, and I think it's the first time we featured his company here. I'm really excited to talk to him. His name is Ricard Carlson, and Ricard is the CEO of a company called Detectify. If I got that wrong, Ricard, please correct me. But if not, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here and chatting.
Nice to have you. So, Ricard, before we jump into what we really want to dive into today, it is the first time on for our audience, our first exposure. Why don't you, if you don't mind, can you give us a little company background on Detectify and maybe a little bit of your own background?
Of course, happy to do so. I guess my background comes, the company background is my technical co-founders started off as really strong and capable white hats. So they were hacking companies under responsible disclosure and bug bounty programs. And they started to realize that quite a few years ago that most of security regime was done and focusing very much on infrastructure security back then. I mean, almost 7-8 years ago. And very little focus was actually spent on application security. And they started automating and scripting their own attacks in ways to simplify their own bug bounty hunting. And eventually that turned into a product, or starting to get into a product. And my background, I'm a physicist, software engineer, mathematician from school, university, went to management consulting, but then realized I want to get back to technology. I teamed up with them to, so to say, run everything related to product and commercial side in the beginning, and then they continued building on the engines.
Excellent.
That's actually a great background. And surprisingly in security, it's not unusual, right, to have a group of 2-3 founders where one or two of them really are very technical folks. You have business and operations expertise. Sometimes you have sales, right, marketing as well. Detectify. How long has it been in business? Website, stuff like that.
Yeah, we've been around for about 8 years, but taking a bit of a shift throughout these years. I guess we started off building a very much of a traditional web app security scanner, but that was built for modern companies that wanted to leave, so to say, the infrastructure providers that did it in the past. But fairly early on, we started also working on the side and different types of attacks related to DNS-related vulnerabilities. We wrote, I think, one of the first blog posts out there on attack methods related to misconfigurations related to subdomain takeover. Already back in 2014, we built the first prototype of this service testing for subdomain takeovers at scale in 2016, with 1 or 2 customers that we built it. And then gradually we realized we want to leave so to say, the old traditional web AppSec game behind us and fully transition into what we're working on now is related to external attack surface management. And this comes back since we started in 2016, that this is what we wanted to do, but it starting to feel like the market starts to now considering their attack surfaces as a way to on how to should do security combined with modern development practices.
You know, it's interesting. This is actually the second interview I've done today that is talking about attack surface management, attack surface security. And part of it is that, you know, our attack surfaces today are so different between COVID, the cloud, IoT, and all of these things. Our attack surfaces are, it's just not the people's laptops and the servers anymore. You know what I mean? That, looking back on it, that seemed almost simple.
I mean, it was super simple when you had your servers in the basement. You had one Ethernet cable going out through your firewall, and you to 100% knew what you're exposing. And for someone to open a port in that firewall in the basement, you had to fill out a form, and it took you 1 month. Today, when in the DevOps world, when people are controlling their whole exposure through Terraform and with, you know, the DNS pointers, the rate of change of the attack surface of companies are so vastly different compared to where they were, you know, a few years ago.
Absolutely. And the old adage of you can't protect what you don't know you have, right? And so the whole kind of just a subset of this is just attack surface discovery, asset discovery, knowing what your exposure is before you can even think about protecting it is another, just a whole world unto itself.
And I think we see many of our most advanced customers, and the way that we think about is that they don't want to hunt for vulnerabilities. They want to hunt for also like policy anomalies and violations of their own security regimes. As an example, we have a customer that says, okay, we have 200 domains and all of them should be behind Cloudflare. And as our example, then we can run a test for them as a special test that say, okay, we can validate that policy every 8 hours that all of these 200 domains are behind Cloudflare. And this is not something that you can really readily do from the inside, or if you're thinking from a static code analysis tool or something. This is about how you set up your configuration and what your attack surface looks like.
Absolutely. I don't mean to cut the conversation short, but I want to kind of segue into, you know, what we wanted to talk about today, because another thing that's happened is, look, I was in security 25 years, still am in security 25 plus years. Yeah, thank you. So, and I started a company called Still Secure, co-founded in 2001. And we had an early entrant in the vulnerability management space, right? It was a Nessus-based scanner. Yeah. But back then, just getting people to scan their production environment was quite a task. If you scanned once a year, man, I loved you, right? Because you were ahead of most of the other people. One of the big shifts, no pun intended, we've seen is, with the rise of DevSecOps, is this so-called shift left movement, right? Shift left idea, where, hey, not only are we going to scan in production, we're actually going to scan in development, because kind of a stitch in time saves 9, right? It's much cheaper to fix vulnerabilities pre-production than post. And so by trying to automate and moving our scanning left, shifting it left, we release a higher quality code. And as we go to automation and more frequent code releases, automating that and shifting it left is a good thing. Now, of course, I'm going to stop there and say, what do you think, Ricard?
I think it's something that's actually, I would say that it's almost completely wrong to say that it's cheaper to find things earlier. That, I think, was true when you were coding for 3 months and then you did a release. because then you have built up so much surrounding things around something that dependencies that you need, if you need to revert something, was extremely costly. If you look at most modern companies, or if you take fully integrated domain-driven engineering teams that have all the capabilities that, to host, code, ship, release within their own team, they ship maybe multiple times per day. The whole thing about it should be 10x cheaper because you found it earlier, I think that's wrong, because earlier does not exist. Because you might do an experiment on 2% of the traffic that you receive, as an example, or you say you release something under a feature flag and then you revert it back if it didn't work. So I think the difference between staging and production does no longer exist in reality. It only exists in compliance documents.
Fair. I think another, and maybe you're saying it without saying it, another, quite frankly, we used to have dev environments, test environments, where we would test features and code before going into production. I think in the rush to release, to deploy today, our production environments, quite frankly, are test environments, or to a certain extent.
In many industries,
especially with feature flags.
Yeah, in many industries that are not regulated because of deep compliance. Some financial industries where you're not allowed to run unvalidated code or untested code in production. But for most other companies, production is the new testing environment.
Yeah. So I think that's one aspect of the issue. The other aspect of an issue is, historically, us in the security world, we tend to be focused on whatever the shiny new object is. And in putting our focus on shift left, we almost ignore or discount, or we just don't give the emphasis on so-called shift right? Doing that post-production type of testing that we were just getting good at when we started. I don't know, getting good at's a relative term, but we were doing better at than before we started with the shift left as well. Do you see that as a problem?
I see it as a problem that people or organizations are trying to hunt for zero vulnerabilities in production. Because if you're going to achieve that, the implications on your overall business in terms of speed and other business, I think it's too high. But I think what organizations should really focus on is if a critical thing is being found in production, because also, but I think it's typically said 80% of the code that you're exposing is not being actively maintained. So if you only scan in pre-production, how do you then get access to it? But in general, if you find new problems and vulnerabilities in production, how fast will you be able to review it and ship a patch to it? I think the best-in-class organizations, then we're actually talking of hours. When organizations that we work with, we have some organizations, that's sitting there and they have a review cycle, they have security boards, and everything needs to go through different gates, and it takes them 3-4 weeks maybe. If they are fast to resolve something, I think I have customers that says, if you do it in 90 days, we're good. But if you instead aim of getting an agile enough process, so if something is found in production that you can fix it in a matter of hours, then I think you're better geared for when new things happen. Then when, for example, a Log4j or a Spring4Shell or the new thing, so to say, shit hits the fan, you will have the systems and processes ready to actually act on things fast.
Absolutely. So, Ricard, you said something about the zero vulnerabilities in shipped software as a goal. You know what? And if I said that to 100 people, probably 90 of them would say, yeah, that's a great goal. I mean, who wants to ship with vulnerabilities? But to me, that's almost like, and I don't mean it in a light way, or I'm not being disrespectful, but it's almost like China's zero COVID policy, right? You're not going to just totally stop COVID from 1.5 billion people over there. So to kind of just like shut down everything every time one person gets COVID or whatever is after a while, I think it shows that it's not the right way to do it. And I think it's the same thing with the zero vulnerability in shipping code.
Right.
Security's always been true. Look, if we wanted great security, just unplug everything from the internet and you're okay. You'll be pretty secure. But security's always been about managing risk.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, especially from a business point of view. How much am I going to spend versus what's my risk reduction or exposure? And, so I would say, can you get to a zero vulnerability shipping? I don't know if you could ever get there, but the price of getting close, it's like getting to the speed of light, right? The closer you get to that, the more expensive, the more energy it takes, the more everything it takes. When you do a risk, rewards kind of thing, that's impractical.
Yeah.
Anyone who says they should do that is crazy, I think.
Yeah, but most people would agree. I mean, if 99 or 90 people would say that it's a great thing, but I would ask people 3 or 4 questions. Do you really have access to all pipelines and servers and cloud environments? You could test everything in a shift left mentality. And the second thing, could all security tests or security issues be detected when you're testing or doing code review on an isolated component? And how well does your staging environment really represent your production environments? And how much delay can you introduce into a CI/CD pipeline before developers start screaming at you? So all of these 4 things, I think, also says that it's impractical to do it.
Well, so I guess this is where you and I are probably going to disagree then, though. So I want Goldilocks, right? I want to find that sweet spot where I do enough shift left testing that I find a good amount of vulnerabilities before the stuff goes into production. But I want that shift left testing to be fast, automated, and help improve my quality. I don't want it to take away from testing that I do in post-production either, because to me that's almost like a different animal. That's a different set of tests, a different focus and everything else. I want my cake and eat it too. I want both.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Then we agree.
Yeah, but you should use the right tool for the right job. I think running static code analysis or SCA, software composition analysis tools as part of like a staging or pipeline makes a ton of sense. They are fast, they run directly, the developers get direct feedback. But then we started to talk with organizations that wants to introduce dynamic testing in staging environments. And I think that's where people are over-engineering and making it way too complicated because of where they're heading. So I agree with you. You can have your things on the left side, and you should, because that makes sense. But then you have people that are trying to move some of they say they want to run everything on that side. And I think that's where the cost versus benefit is not maybe always that clear.
To go all Star Wars on you, there has to be balance in the Force, right? Yeah. You need it, on both sides. Ricard, this is a great conversation. We're just about out of time. For people who want to get more information about Detectify, where do they go?
Detectify.com.
Can you spell it for us?
It's hard, but DETECTIFY.com.
Perfect, man. Hey, thanks for jumping on here on Techstrong TV with us today. We'd love to have you back on. These are the kinds of topics we discuss at a lot of our virtual events and everything. We've got to get you on a panel with some folks and let's talk about this.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Detectify.com. Check it out. Ricard Carlson, CEO over at Detectify. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be back in a minute.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and Techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, we're back at the Open Source Summit in Dublin, and we're going to be talking about research. And I know a lot of folks may not think that that's an exciting topic, but I promise this will be an interesting conversation about that very thing, because the challenge is we don't always know where open source software is used, how it's used, or what its impact is, what the economics around it are. So what exactly are you guys up to, and how are you going about sorting out where is all this open source software, who's using it, and why we should be paying more attention maybe?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a great question, and it isn't answered in a short amount of time, I can assure you. So really, to back up, the rationale for founding Linux Foundation Research was to help answer all of those questions. What is taking place in open source project communities? What are the opportunities that are created? Who is getting involved? What's the velocity? Which projects are waning? Where's the acceleration? Which are the technologies that are benefiting from open source collaboration most recently? Which are the industries benefiting? And so the scope of the opportunity to explore is incredibly vast. And the ability to go deep into these individual questions is really amazing. And so the Linux Foundation, being at the heart of so many open source project communities, has a really unique opportunity to help answer these questions and leverage the access that we have with our project communities to describe the challenges, the opportunities, the individual technologies, the applications, and really help people understand that open source is a mechanism for mass collaboration at scale that just provides such tremendous value.
How do you find where all these instances of open source are? Because people just download stuff, and they don't readily volunteer exactly what they're doing or why they did it or how far along they are. So how do you get them to engage with you?
Yeah, that's a great challenge. Knowing who is downloading open source code is a huge mystery in many cases, because downloads tend to exceed implementations. What we are able to measure is the output of those downloads. And the other thing is that some downloads are taking place not necessarily in the source environments themselves. So measuring the extent of open source usage, it's not something that we're likely able to solve at LF Research today, not easily. What we can do is identify the readiness of industries in adopting open source technologies, the readiness of industries in consuming code, the extent to which different industries are contributing back to upstream to project communities. What are the barriers preventing both consumption and contribution? What are the tools that can help alleviate those barriers? How can we secure software supply chains through standards and best practices? So we are exploring things that we can answer more readily than some of those challenging questions, like what's the prevalence and use of all of the open source software that's actually downloaded. It is quite pervasive, very difficult to answer.
There's also a whole geographic distribution of open source. So are you guys looking at that as well in different regions and how they're using things? Because it will vary from Italy to China to Australia. So, are you seeing any patterns there?
Yeah. Initially, when we launched Linux Foundation Research, we created a framework for analysis. And at the outset, it didn't include geography. We did start out by saying we're going to do three things. We're going to look at industry uses of open source. We're going to look at open source through the lens of different technology horizontals. We'll look at open source ecosystem issues, things like security and diversity, equity, inclusion, and standards and leadership issues. And then about a year into the program, we thought, there's another way to look at this, and it was through geographic lines. We knew that there were dynamics and challenges specific to different geographic regions. Certainly, Europe has a different way of operating than North America, than Asia. And wanting to invest more heavily in Europe, we thought, we need research around what the state of readiness is, what is the state of open source in Europe. So we thought, let's launch a new framework for exploring open source dynamics along different geographical lines. And we can go beyond continent. We can go right down to the country level, say what's going on in Italy. What we can do is infinite. My boss, Mike Dolan, who helped launch LF Research, said, we will not have issues with, the number of topics we can explore. Scope creep is our biggest challenge, and trying to prioritize how we look at regional issues and which projects to work on is that is always the challenge, because there's so much to explore.
You mean your resources are not infinite?
No, they are not infinite. And in fact, we could do anything with a larger budget. We could go down to the country level. We could go to the regional level. I happen to be from Toronto, Canada, where we have a unique blockchain community. And why did it form? Who's involved? What are the technologies that were born in Toronto? It is incredible to do regional or geographic analysis of hubs of innovation. If we look at Silicon Valley, that's a whole area of study unto itself.
What would people do with the research? What is the action item at the back end of it? Are we going to share this with governments? Are we going to share this with companies to get them to be more engaged? Or what is the plan for the end product of all the research?
Well, we aren't producing research for the sake of it, I can assure you. The idea is to create actionable insights that will inform public policy. It will inform organizational strategy. It will inform project community priorities and foundation level priorities. And so having data that can be useful at all levels of the ecosystem is really, really important. And having, our research is publicly available, and that's one of the important tenets of LF Research, that not only do we make our research projects openly available, but we also make the data available too. So links to open data sets live on data.world platform. Our data from surveys and other data sets used in our research is published under a CDLA, Contributor Data License Agreement 2.0, and ready for the world to do their own analysis with our survey data. So because we ask our communities to contribute data sets freely, we feel it's very important to then give back the analysis and the output of that data compilation and analysis freely as well.
There is this whole open data movement in the research circles. Do you guys think you're going to be at the front of that? Because it seems like we talk a lot about it, but outside of a few government agencies, I really haven't seen a lot of open data sets yet. So, is that going to be the new thing?
Yeah, I believe it is. I know my colleagues worked on developing the CDLA 2.0 license. It is a core principle. I think through openness and transparency, we simply get better outcomes. And it's no different from tech being open. Having access to open data is a vital part of innovation. And so I'm really pleased that we are able to release data. Obviously, no personally identifiable information is released. We clean our data sets and we prepare them in such a way for optimizing utility by everybody in the world.
Right. So how does someone engage with you guys in the research? There's plenty of research organizations out there. There are also plenty of corporations. What do you want them to do in terms of engaging with the foundation?
Well, give us a call. That's the first step. I am presently creating a how to engage with us prospectus, so that even before the first phone call, organizations or communities who are interested in commissioning a research project can know about our methodology, can know about our research cycle timelines, can consider allocating an appropriate budget for research, and aligning with our philosophy and approach, and understanding why the Linux Foundation is a preferred option for open source research today. I think to date, organizations have come to us and said, can you do research in this area at the intersection of the microgrid and open source technologies? Or are you willing to explore the carbon footprint of non-fungible tokens? And in all cases, we say yes, yes, and yes. Let's do it. Every research conversation is a discovery and an opportunity to create value and a knowledge network. And what I love about the process is the extent to which we engage with all facets of the community. Developers, project leaders, member organizations, regulatory bodies, and sometimes members of government or public sector willing to have a conversation with us.
Mm-hmm. When you think about how this project is going to come together and live, will the data become, can I throw algorithms at all this data that you're going to kind of create and do some more interesting analytics? Because the state of analytics keeps evolving and the tools are evolving. So, what can we do with all this data that maybe we didn't think about before, or some new ideas for thinking about research that are going to be brand new?
Wow. So on the algorithm front, I would encourage anybody to just play around with the data sets that are available. We use tooling from an organization called MarketSite. That is our platform. There are competitive platforms like Tableau and a few others. But we have had really good success with our data analytics platform and how we are able to clean data and present data and standardize our approaches. But if anybody from the community is interested in sharing their algorithmic approaches to data analytics, that'll only make our approaches better. One thing I have seen is, as my colleague who leads up our quantitative research and methodologies, named Stephen Hendrick, with each analyst he works with in the research process, he learns something new from them about a different technique, about a different approach, about a different way to present the data. And so we're still learning. So bring on those algorithms and share them with us.
Because there's a whole massive data scientist community that's keenly interested in all this stuff. So maybe they'll become an extension of the whole open source community as we go along. Have you discovered any biases, either negative or positive, that we have in the community today that the data may not support or that would surprise us?
Yeah, absolutely. Not leading the witness, overcoming bias from Linux Foundation friendly communities is something that's really important. And we noticed that responses to survey questions are different from survey respondents that come from Linux Foundation mailing lists, for example, versus those that come from an outside third-party panel provider. So we do like to use survey responses from knowledgeable respondent communities who may not be familiar with the Linux Foundation. And what's very interesting is to compare those results.
All right, cool. Folks, this is Hillary Carter. She's in charge of research at the Foundation. Reach out to her if you have questions. Don't call me because I won't have the answers. She's the one with all the bright ideas and the data to back it up. Hey guys, thanks for watching this latest edition, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, we're at the Open Source Summit in Dublin, and my guest is Gab Columbro, who's the new head of the Linux Foundation for Europe, just announced today. And we're going to talk about, well, why do we need this new foundation? I mean, we already have a global one, so what's this European one going to do that the global one doesn't?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's an exciting time for me personally, and I think for the Linux Foundation, and hopefully for the European open source community. So you make a good point. As I mentioned in my keynote this morning, the Linux Foundation has already a pretty strong presence in Europe. We have, over 30% of our members are from Europe. over 10 staff, and we have several projects, including the one I run, FinOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation, that are very Europe strong. But the reality is that, this is a region that is very unique in a couple of ways. One, there is a very strong, grassroots open source community paired with, a public sector that is very open source forward. Definitely in the sense of, transparency, reuse, open source as a public good, therefore maximizing the usage of sort of taxpayers' money. But also in terms of the policies that they put forward and that they think open source can enable. So if you pair that with the fact that Europe is really the only region that has sort of a supranational entity, like the European Union, that aligns goals across sort of sovereign nations, as well as create, rules of the road for how the collaboration should happen from a sort of a legal and IP standpoint, sort of how the IP flows around Europe, it became pretty clear to us that having an entity incorporated in Europe would open up major possibilities of collaboration that were just not possible before. And I'm going to make a couple of examples. We came across projects in the past that were either addressing a specific European regulation, or they were largely backed by European companies. Mm-hmm. And therefore, there was a perception potentially to stand up the project in the US that would sort of be a headwind for the project. As well as potentially projects that want to try to go for alternative sorts of fundings beyond membership, like, for example, European grants. And these are three, I think, important use cases as to why you need an actual entity in the European territory to be able to, access funding, make people feel comfortable that there is a local asset ownership of the trademark and the project assets, and of course, being able to address specific problems and challenges that are European. Does that make sense?
It does. The European Union is at the forefront of a lot of the regulations that we see now coming into IT, and there's a lot of conversation about the need for more regulations around open source software supply chains, and a lot of folks are having these conversations. So do you guys think that your group will be at the forefront of that conversation with the EU, and then that may affect everybody globally ultimately?
Yes. Yes, I absolutely think that, especially in the wake of Log4Shell and especially in my world, in the banking sector, it's been a really important wake-up call to the fact that, everyone has a part to play in ensuring sustainability of the open source ecosystem, not just, mere security, but really our developers paid for their contributions, are, open source projects actually sustainable in the long run? What's their health? And so this is by no means a regional problem. Of course, the Linux Foundation has been, paving the way in working very closely with the White House through our OpenSSF initiative, Open Source Security Foundation, putting together a really important mobilization plan to address open source sustainability across the board. But again, as you said, there's a lot of conversations in Europe as well in investing in open source supply chain and open source sustainability. So certainly that is an area where I think having a more substantial presence of the Linux Foundation and being able to bridge some of those conversations across regions is very important. Another area, I think, is really being able to, bring together some of these real or perceived potential conflicts, between regions. I think especially, as administration changes, we are now in a place where, it's easier sort of to collaborate across the Atlantic. And so I do think that open source, gives a vital chance to sort of actually bring the conversation forward rather than sort of fostering silos, amongst the allies as well.
Wow. Do you think that the technocrats in the EU will understand these issues, or are we really working at a base level foundation of education? And I'm asking the question because in the US there's a proposal in Congress talking about banning CVEs in all applications used by the government, which for anybody who's in software, that's kind of crazy.
Yep. Yep. I think it's a really hard question, and the answer is not an easy one. We just released today, I'm going to sort of try to be data-driven in the answer here. We just released today our first regional research World of Open Source Europe Spotlight 2022. And I think one of the key aspects that was uncovered was the fact that there is a strong vision for open source here in Europe, but less so an understanding of how to get there, both in terms of the policies and in terms of really what open source collaboration can enable. Meaning, the EU here definitely sees open source as a mean to achieve transparency, to achieve reuse, less so to use their convening power to actually bring all the different constituents together to actually get to this idea of the digital commons, to actually get to this idea of whatever the social goals they're trying to get to. And so I think the short answer to your question is that there's a lot of investment to be done on the why open source can be sort of a way forward behind those technology, sort of behind those concerns. So probably, the answer to your initial question is no, I don't think everyone will immediately understand the value proposition, but it behooves us to, show also in Europe, even more than what we've done already, the amazing successes and collective value that the Linux Foundation has been able to foster the production of all over the world. In the Linux Foundation, we have, again, a pretty even split representation across regions. So if we were able to make allies and non-allies collaborate, well, I think there should be a possibility here for Europe and the US to collaborate.
So will you need chapters by countries? Because, well, obviously Great Britain is not part of the EU, and not everybody in the EU always agrees with each other. Trying to get some Italian guys to agree with the Spanish guys can be a problem, right?
Or with the French. So, 2 points here. One, I still catch myself. One of our code names internally was LFEU, and I still catch myself saying it publicly, but the reality is that this is LF Europe. This is not just LFEU. Our goal is really to address not just the bloc, but also the UK, where, by the way, I have a major experience for my Finos role. Half of our members are in London and in the UK. And so, I just think that, first of all, it's important not to sort of limit ourselves to that. Then, yes, you're right. There's no one size fits all as far as Europe goes. And I think that is also one of the reasons why you need a European to really understand the cultural differences here. Back to our research, some of the most interesting results was sort of slicing and dicing the results by region, by actual country. And yes, you're right. You see very different levels of understanding of open source, very different levels of, how useful open source is perceived to a certain industry or to a certain sector in that specific country. And that's very much a function, it seems to be, from the research of sort of the broader understanding of open source, the broader technology investment, from a national government. So I think it's premature to say that we will start LFU chapters in every country. I mean, I would love to be there in 12 months from now. But I think it's absolutely true that we can foster collaborations at national level. Like, it's not just the EU, it's not just Europe as a whole. I think we could see, especially on the public sector side, collaboration across municipalities, collaborations across different ministries. There's I think a lot of ways to skin this cat, or there's a lot of levels of granularity that the collaboration can happen at.
There's a lot of cities that can become sister cities with each other, even though they're in different countries. Right?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a huge potential there, and I, as much as I like to make jokes about my other fellow European countries, ultimately we're all on the same boat here.
How should they go about getting involved if you're a company in Europe? Because there's a lot of conversation now about a lot of people benefit from open source software, but they don't give back enough, and there's a lot of issues around the security. So how do we get these organizations to contribute? Because I think a lot of them are hamstrung. They don't really know where to get started or how to get started.
Yes. Well, I certainly will try to reuse some of the successful recipes that I think we're able to get, the largest investment banks in the world to collaborate globally. My community in Finos is sort of half and a half, as I mentioned, between London and New York. And, there's really, I think from our perspective, we need to continue investing both in the why and in the how. We need to make sure that we continue showing, from a corporate perspective, the ROI of open source, the return on investment, which sometimes can take multiple years. And oftentimes, when you're talking to tech companies or to banks, they want to see a return in 3, 6 months, a year. And so there is certainly an element of education and evangelization that needs to be done there. But when you talk, and we will continue, of course, investing on the how as well. I think the To-Do group, especially the European chapter and the Linux Foundation in general, has done a fantastic job at accelerating. Once you're clear with the why, how you're going to go about it. I think the level of engagement and the way companies engage, it's very much a function of their maturity and understanding of open source, both again in the why and in the how. And so, look, if you have strategic leadership support and you have an OSPO that allows your developers to contribute, I think the first and foremost way is put sweat equity in the community, contribute your developers to your project. If you are not yet there from a, for example, policy standpoint. Again, our research showed that there's an imbalance from consumption policies versus contribution policies. Well, look, you can throw money at the problem in the sense that you should consider not just membership in the Linux Foundation or other foundations, but direct-to-maintainer funding. There are now several platforms that, allow that and encourage that. And, through the great work that the OpenSSF is doing, we are starting to try and prioritize which are the top, 100 projects that the world depends on. Well, that's probably a good place to start. If you're not ready to sort of commit to a foundation, and of course, I'd love for folks to join us in LF Europe, but there's also direct-to-maintainer funding. That's another option. So I think sweat equity contribution, joint foundations, and direct-to-maintainer funding would be my top 3.
All right, so we need code, money, and lawyers.
Yes, I think that's a good recap. You're much more synthetic than I am.
All right, and just for the last little note, so people miss Dublin, where's the next big meetup that they should be thinking about going to have these conversations?
So I would like to see everyone at first of all, Linux Foundation Membership Summit in Lake Tahoe, not very close to Europe, but definitely, again, in the scope, in the idea of sort of being global, that will be the major sort of meeting in November of all the Linux Foundation members. And then, I plan to be back in Europe earlier in the year. We will have another open source summit, and certainly KubeCon in Amsterdam will be another great place to meet up. But I would certainly love to hear from anyone at linuxfoundation.eu.
All right, send him the email, not me.
info@linuxfoundation.eu. Thank you.
All right, Gab, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey everyone, Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs here at Techstrong Learning. First up, tomorrow, Tuesday, November 1st at 11 a.m. Eastern, Shamim Ahmed, CTO for DevOps at Broadcom Software, will unpack the components and sub-processes that truly make up continuous testing. Join us for Continuous Everything, 8 continuous testing best practices to attain your continuous delivery goals. Jumping to Thursday morning, November 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern, Lee Faust, Global Field CTO for GitLab, will walk us through some advanced Git techniques aimed at helping platform engineers integrate security and operations best practices into their CI/CD pipelines. Users of GitLab will not want to miss Git workflows for platform engineers. And Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, Nudge Security and Techstrong Research are tag teaming, debunking the stupid user myth in security. Our speakers will review a recent survey that indicates that new approaches need to be taken to improve security compliance with a remote workforce. So that's all I've got for you right now, but as always, we have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs waiting for you here at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
Previously on Engineering the Change.
It's kind of like being on a football team. You got to make cuts to the roster, right? But we got to take it down to 3 finalists. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
So,
She's in.
Yeah. But there was, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this. I give extra bonus points to people who can write well and can express themselves, and Donald did express himself. All right, so let's go through this then. Stephanie Sanchez, Donald Bazil, and Carly Duvel are our 3 finalists for this cohort's Engineering the Change Scholarship.
Engineering the Change has literally changed the lives of scholarship winners. Here are our past recipients.
My name is Victoria Roas. I am an immigrant from Brazil. I came to this country when I was 10 years old.
My name is Drew Johnson. I'm a full-stack software engineer.
My name is Alina Maluk. I'm from Ukraine. I'm the winner of scholarship from 2 cohorts before me.
The Engineering of Change scholarship that I won last year was life-changing.
I really poured my soul and told my story to them, and a few weeks later I got a call from Alan, and it was, I even cried on the phone, I think. And it was like a life-changing moment.
The program at Boca Code was amazing. It was easy for me with zero experience to learn the fundamentals of software development.
My career is completely changed from barely being able to, hold down a job to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Boca Code has built me up.
I got a job at hot fintech software company at the day of graduation.
I think that becoming a software engineer has been one of the most rewarding things in my life.
I am Carly Duberval, mother of 2 amazing children. I have a bachelor degree in accounting.
My name is Donald Brazil. I was born in Haiti. I was raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Growing up, I've always been interested in technology.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm originally from Haiti. I've resided in Miami for wherever it feels. I currently have a degree in psychology, and I enjoy helping people.
I migrated recently to Florida because of insecurity and political issue.
I fell into software engineering as something I would love to pursue.
I feel like there is a void that I still have. There's something tugging at me because I feel like I have not challenged myself to reach my full potential.
Here in US, my degree is not accepted. I need to work for my family duties.
Winning this scholarship is a great opportunity for me to finally, pursue that career in software engineering. And, I would love to, give back to those who were in my position where they were completely lost and didn't really have any guidance.
My goal is to be a vessel to other people, other underrepresented communities.
Without money and resources, I can't afford to go to Boca Code.
And being a finalist is an amazing opportunity. I would never have thought I would have been even considered.
This field, I will be good at it. And I have an opportunity to make an impact on my community and the world.
If I won this scholarship, I will share my knowledge with other Black women, immigrants who share my faith.
I would love to, have the opportunity at the end of the day to showcase those who believe in me, and then, help others who also, would be in the same position that I am.
Because I know my contribution will make a lifelong impact on the world.
Thanks so much for joining us here for this interview today. And you know what? Making it to the finals for this is an accomplishment in and of itself. And I think it really talks about the kind of person you are. And, reading your essay, I was very, very impressed. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I will be that software engineer who will help immigrants to achieve their dreams.
5 years, I would love to see myself, slowly opening my organization, have it on the ground, running. I just want to see myself helping others, just like others help me. I just want to give back to those gave to me.
I see myself hopefully excelling in the field of software engineering, and I don't know exactly what my niche will be. So I know that I'm going to be excelling. I don't know exactly what it'll look like right now, but you guys will be proud.
Why do you want to be a software engineer? What's gonna make you stick through this at the end of the day?
I love it. I can do it. I will do it. Why I will do it? Because I love it.
It's just a great field to get into. The technology portion of it is just something I've always been interested in. As a kid, you know, I've always been interested in computers, phones, gadgets.
I always felt a need to, or a pull toward doing something for someone else. In the field of engineering, allows me to continue to do that, because whether it is in a medical field, the automotive field, just the world of entrepreneurship, there's just so many different ways that I can continue doing good and making an impact.
One of the things that's very near and dear to my heart is, equity, parity, gender diversity, and just diversity and parity on all levels, equality. And I wonder how do you envision going about doing that?
Like I did with my old career, I lift women to accounting in my country. I motivate them, I assist them, and help them to achieve, like I said, to achieve their dream, to be excellent in this field.
I would love to open an organization that can, give back to those and help guide them with the, the opportunities that, I'd had from this experience.
What drives you to do software engineering and not, go back to something that you've already known and you've obviously been very successful at?
I would say now everything is technology. So why should I say in accounting? If the world is moving and everything now is tech. I have two brothers. One died in 2007. He was a senior software engineer. My youngest brother is a software engineer. Why not me? It's because I'm woman? No. I want it, I will do it.
At the moment right now, I work inventory for a home installation company. It's a pretty okay job, but it's not what I feel that I was meant to do.
The knowledge I have, I can pass on to other people. I know some of the challenges that our communities face. So with my knowledge and my mentorship, whether it's mentoring one person or just a group of people, exposing them to this field and to just other fields that exist where there's more to life than just what is in front of us. And I believe that I can be a bridge in that gap.
How do you feel like the scholarship is gonna do to you? Like, why is it important for you to win this?
I will share my knowledge with people, with women or immigrants, and use my knowledge to help them.
This scholarship is giving me that opportunity to show the world that, I can do great things.
So this scholarship would definitely assist me in changing the trajectory of my life, and hopefully where I can continue this same legacy and helping other people as well.
Your essay was amazing. Your answers here today were amazing. You really do represent what engineering the change is all about. Thanks for coming in today, and we can't wait to announce our winners soon.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Chad McDonald, who's CISO for Radiant Logic, and we're going to be talking about some of the more unfortunate issues that have to be dealt with when we do have a downturn in the economy, and there are folks who wind up leaving a company, and some of them are not too happy about it, and what you got to do to kind of protect yourselves from that kind of, shall we say, insider threat that you're not quite expecting. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
So we have seen a couple instances already where some IT folks kind of vented their anger on a company by, helping to breach some of that stuff that they had access to. It's probably not overly common, but it does happen, and it can certainly happen with folks other than IT. What should organizations be thinking through right now as we kind of go through this downturn? We are seeing people resize their companies, and it's a difficult process, but what do you got to do to kind of think this through completely?
Sure. First off, open your eyes, understand sort of that there are potential for employees or staff, contractors even, to be not so happy with what's going on in an organization, whether it's, they themselves being impacted by a reduction in force, or their coworker, being in that situation, or frankly, even just being asked to do more or work longer hours. Lots of scenarios can sort of lead to what we call the insider threat, as you mentioned. It isn't exclusive to sort of the post-exit. So if someone gets laid off or leaves the organization, that's not the only opportunity for insider threat. Can be existing employees that are well within inside your organization, your security perimeter, that you should be concerned about as well. The biggest thing that you can do for insider threat, to consider sort of the existing employee scenario, is security awareness. And it's always the cheapest and easiest way to sort of, enable your staff to deal with security problems. But it's really, if you see something, say something. If someone is not a happy camper with, their pay or whatever, there's an increased opportunity for that person to do things that aren't necessarily above board. And so it has to be considered.
Are different types of insiders representing different types of threats, and are the IT guys maybe deserving of more scrutiny? Because a lot of times they're creating backdoors in the systems for their own convenience, but when things go wrong, that may become something that only they know the way into, right?
Yeah, it's easy to target sort of the IT staff as sort of the 800-pound big bad gorilla, or whatever you want to call it. But it's not, the problem is not exclusive to that group. It can be, a sales force that, stealing sort of a Rolodex, if you will, or a list of sales contacts. It could be developers, adding backdoors into an application they wish to, deal with later on, or, someone just manipulating a database for their own particular gain. It really depends on your business model, but the problem is not exclusive to one group. The challenge with the IT staff is they generally have privileges that are elevated well above what your normal staff member may have. And so there's obviously more risk there. So I think that's why that group gets sort of a little more scrutiny than others.
It also seems like we don't really do a great job of managing privilege there. It seems like everybody has access to everything and anything whenever they want. That seems to be our default. So is that part of our problem, is that we didn't really think through who should have access to what, when, and where?
It's absolutely part of the problem. It's probably foundational to the problem. The reality, and I've been CIO at a few different organizations. The reality is when you have sort of the joiner, mover, leaver scenario with a staff member, a new hire joining the organization, moving within the organization, or leaving, those are always opportunities for there to be sort of a delta, if you will, with what their intended privileges are within an organization. So if someone joins, it's easier to say, just copy Mike Vizard's account. They're going to be working in a similar role. We'll give them whatever permissions. That person may not realize that you, Mike, are the administrator for a particular system. And so they've just inadvertently given this new employee administrator access. And again, the problem sort of expands out greatly, and the scope and scale of this can get pretty complex with larger organizations as people move around within different departments. Typically, you don't see a lot of security around adjusting those privileges and entitlements as people move within the organization. They typically look at the new hire status and the leave status primarily, but that moving, that pivoting within an organization can, is a blind spot for most places.
Right. And by the time an employee with a dozen years of experience leaves the company, they've got access to just about everything there is because they've been in so many job functions and roles. And no one thought to keep track of that because the IT people will just give people access to whatever the business people tell them to, right?
Exactly. And, you add into the problem, Mike, when the reality now is that anyone with a credit card can go and subscribe to a cloud service or a SaaS platform that may or may not, end up holding critical data, whether it's PII or personally identifiable information, credit card information, whatever. Developers, IT admins, people in marketing can subscribe to a different system. They're the administrator because they're paying for it. Well, they leave. There's company data in that system, and no one at the other organization knows about it. So you've got this IT sprawl and identity sprawl that tends to happen as organizations get complex. And our migration to the cloud hasn't really done a great job of corralling all of that access into one spot for many organizations.
Mm-hmm. We hear a lot about this shift towards identity as kind of the new foundation for zero trust. Is that how we're going to go and kind of solve this problem? And it's not clear to me that people even understand what that means because, they understand that I have access through a password. Well, their assumption is that you're already managing by identity. So what do we mean by this new construct for identity management and what's required?
Sure. And it's probably best explained if we do a little very quick history lesson on sort of, security and how security started. So I've been doing this a billion years, it feels like. And when I started, you had a data center, and that data center had a firewall, and all of the IT systems were in that data center behind the firewall. And you had a very almost tangible perimeter around systems that you wanted to secure and access that you had. Well, today, everything's in the cloud, either in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or SaaS platforms like Salesforce. There is no perimeter around that. There is no controllable access, no points you can choke off if someone sort of leaves the organization or moves. The only thing that we have that is consistent between those systems is your identity. So there has to be an evolution within IT to consider, again, as you've stated very eloquently, identity has to effectively take the role of that firewall and that physical perimeter that we had in our data center. Identity has to become the new perimeter, or we really don't have a great shot at providing, appropriate levels of security for organizations.
Will this ultimately replace the whole username password construct then? I mean, are we kind of moving away from that model? Because frankly, it seems to me anyway, the biggest problem we have with security these days is people's credentials get stolen. They're on the dark web and people have that stuff and they can log in anywhere and nobody's changed their password in God knows how long. So, is that what we're kind of getting at and moving to? And how long will that journey take?
I don't know if we're getting away from it completely. I think where we're seeing is an evolution. I do expect, I don't know for how much longer we'll always have username password type scenarios. But what you're also seeing as consumers see now, if you go to your bank's website and you attempt to log in from a new browser, it's going to ask you some contextual questions, or it's going to send a code over to your email address or to your phone, or frankly, you're asked to use an authentication device to provide some additional information. That's your multi-factor. That's sort of that was the next evolution. Now you're seeing contextual-based access where you provide some information that you have or but it's also saying, what are you trying to do and where are you trying to do it from? Does this make sense with your normal behavior? So you're seeing some intelligence applied even beyond that to help add a layer of security, if you will, to just that old, worn out sort of username and password that we had back in the 90s. That is effectively effectively useless these days from a security perspective. I mean, I forget the math on how complex your password needs to be these days to stand up against modern computing, but username and passwords against a computer these days, it's relatively trivial to crack that. And so you're always looking for some other information to help provide real security to credentials.
I think we've all experienced that banking login thing that you just described there, but a lot of people are starting to feel like this is getting a little clunky because not only is the banking thing, I got about 30 different other apps, and every time I go in there, someone's asking me for some additional info, and it's every time it comes across now, even I, who know why it's there, go, will let out a little sigh and go, ah. So is there a better way to think about this or do this as we move along here? Because it seems like there's a little fatigue starting to set in already.
Sure. And I think the fatigue is warranted because there's, if you consider myself as a consumer, I probably have 40 different accounts across all the things that I just use in my home. And I've got to do, some various, dance to get into any of these various accounts. And it gets confusing and painful to deal with. You can use things like password password storage, things like maybe a LastPass or 1Password or something like that. Even that gets just tiring. I think what we're starting to see, if you take the iPhone as an example, but not certainly the only example, you're seeing Face ID, right? So you provide some type of login initially to, let's say, your bank. And then the bank application says, would you like to use Face ID to log in going forward? So what you're seeing is, some sort of validation initially and then move to a device, something you've always got that's doing some advanced level of authentication or, I guess, credential verification for you with your biometric sense there. I think that's what you're going to see as an evolution for consumers. Organizations are probably going to track something along those lines. But I think, I think that, as you mentioned, the fatigue with the various constructs around how to log in is weighing on a lot of people, myself included. And I long for the day that I just have to worry about, having a thing like a house key that I can use to log into sites.
So coming back full circle, do you think that we need a set of best practices for not just onboarding folks, but also offboarding them? And we haven't really defined that back-end offboarding process all that well because, there's all this excitement when somebody's a new employee, but when they're either quit or they're leaving, there's this whole kind of, well, sorry to see you go, but it's not, nearly as, shall we say, uplifting. So,
sure.
But do we need to think that through?
I think we need to think that through and the mover situation within the organization. I think there has to be sort of a renewed sense of, seriousness about how we take these things and understanding that the environment or sort of the IT world has changed. It's not, this monolithic perimeter anymore. It's everywhere. Your IT systems are everywhere around the world at this point. And so there has to be sort of some amount of vigor with how we sort of define how we're going to do that. And there has to be a very granular process for ensuring that we've, adjusted permissions or removed permissions as appropriate as people bounce around or leave the organization. It's a different model because the IT warrants, today's IT environment warrants it be a different model than it used to.
Do you think the bad guys are studying our workflows and understanding how things operate before they strike? Because it seems like, stealing a credential and a user password is one thing, but it seems like they can get in there and start watching business processes and figure out exactly what that person has access to. And, they might be there for months before anybody realized it, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, you can just look at the headlines. I think, not to call attention to Samsung, but they had a situation where I think they were breached in June and they didn't do a notification until September, October, which indicates that the bad guys, as you know, were in that environment for a substantial period of time. Now, that was a short period of time. But we've seen cases where the attackers dwelled, if you will, and maybe even harvested information for months. I think sometimes over a year I've seen where the bad guys have been sort of inside that perimeter, whatever that may be, just doing whatever or monitoring. So there is the opportunity for them to, monitor email, look for business processes, try to pivot and sort of find accounts with elevated privileges. I mean, all kind of nefarious things. And the longer these guys dwell, the worse it is.
How do we elevate this conversation? If you're the security team, you got a million things going on, the business people have a million things going on. How do I kind of make this a priority for folks where they're going to sit down and actually do that? Because to your earlier point, it's not just like I go buy a tool and solve this. It's a people and process thing. And that means everybody's kind of got to be involved.
Yeah. I mean, so security has always sort of been tripped up by technology, right? Technology is a wonderful thing and solves, a great number of security problems. But as you note, it's not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet. There are people and process issues that have to be addressed in sort of the security paradigm, if you will. And until security teams or CISOs really recognize that identity is effectively foundational to pretty much every aspect of security, we're going to continue to see these problems. There has to be sort of administrative controls around, as you noted earlier, the processes with which we deal with joiner movers and leavers. From an identity perspective, there has to be sort of technical validation that users are, only have the appropriate privileges, and that's where something like AI or machine learning or behavioral analytics may come into play to help augment sort of the human element. But until all of that happens, this is what we're going to see. IT, sort of the transition to SaaS platforms into the cloud is not making this easier on anyone, and we can't continue to rely on sort of outmoded processes for security to sort of deal with an evolving, very advanced technology problem.
All right, folks, you heard it here. There's always going to be a lot of external factors that influence people's behavior, and we need to expect the proverbial unexpected. Chad, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good day.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Erez Barak, who is Vice President of Observability for Sumo Logic. We're going to be talking about reliability and observability and how they all go hand in hand. Erez, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
In some ways, we've been talking about reliability for some time now, ever since the rise of SREs, but it's not clear to me that everybody kind of gets that as a discipline and what exactly we want them to do or think that they should be focused on. So what, from your perspective, is the real challenge with reliability?
I think what's interesting is about reliability, to your point, we've been talking about it for a while. I think where reliability really takes on another dimension is when scale kicks in, or to be precise, cloud scale. And what we're seeing is a multitude of microservices, multitude of components, multitude of applications all coming together, multi-clouds, hybrid solutions. And that kind of complexity is not just about monitoring. It's not just about setup. It's about how you manage reliability. So reliability management, which is really where we're focused now, is how you manage reliability. Same sort of building blocks we talked about in the past around availability, around performance, around even security. How do you manage that at a very large scale?
And what ultimately are the challenges with that? Because we've had tools measuring everything on the planet, and we are trying to make this shift to observability. And not everybody understands the difference between monitoring and observability. But ultimately, from your perspective, what do we need to measure, or what needs to change that we're not currently measuring?
And maybe I can share a few things we're hearing from customers. And we're hearing things like, we need or we cannot measure SLOs in real time. And we need that real time measurement in order to effectively manage the end user experience. So if I run an end user experience, and that end user experience, it's in an app, someone uses it right now. When something goes wrong, we want to take that into account right now. So the ability to do that in real time is something that, again, as a derivative of the complexity we talked about, continues to be a challenge. Customers are also saying, as you pointed out, Michael, there's alerts for everything, or there's measurement for everything. But what we want to alert on is the error budget. What we want to alert on is how fast is that error budget consumed. Why is that interesting? It allows me as a user, it allows me as a manager of reliability to know where I should focus. Do I push on more and more innovation, new capabilities, breakthroughs in the next month or quarter? Or do I take a step back, play it in a little more safe mode, make sure we're reliable, available on a regular basis? How do I answer that in a data-driven manner? There's many opinions, but once you have the error budget, you get the data support for your decision-making.
Do you think we've been kind of focused in the wrong direction, as it were, but we've been thinking about IT systems out, and maybe what we're really talking about is a more user-centric approach to managing IT from the user into the IT environment, because otherwise we wind up managing a bunch of components and services, but we don't understand what the actual impact is on the experience?
No, to be fair, I think that's been recognized and true for a while. I think, with solutions like real user monitoring, like tracing to an extent that pull in that data, they show to us as vendors and to us as users and to our customers, we very much believe in that end user measurement. So I think that's been around for a while. I think the marriage of that with reliability management, the ability to create an SLO around the customer experience, that's a new way of thinking about my system. And, it's a bit of a, how should I say, frightening thought, right? Don't look at every CPU measurement. Don't jump on every disk storage alert. Let's focus and believe we have the right user view and really help our teams react to the right things and make sure our customers get the right priority of dealing with the issues they're seeing. We do that by raising the priority, raising the urgency of collecting real user data, and then raising the urgency and raising the priority of calculating the SLOs that are based on that versus others.
Are we not organized correctly within IT organizations to achieve that goal? Because I still see a lot of places where there's somebody, they manage the cloud resources and they're in charge of infrastructure and a couple of middleware guys over here and some dev guys over here. And do we need to kind of realign the IT teams around the actual user experience / SLO that we're trying to manage?
Being in my shoes, I don't get to say, are IT teams aligned correctly, set up correctly or not? Oh my God, I definitely have an opinion in the area, but we don't get to do that. We assume there's going to be an organization. We assume that organization evolves, maybe becomes more about real user monitoring in the future, et cetera. But there's always going to be an organization that's aligned with IT. So reliability management is really taking that as an assumption, is saying, this is a technology that allows us to transcend those niche areas, to transcend the buckets, and say, regardless of how you're set up, we'd love if you're optimized, but if you're not, we're able to look across the teams, across the technologies, in a way, normalize the data you have into one SLI or multiple SLI, service level indicators. For those, define objectives. And for those, define error budgets. So what have we done here? We decoupled the physical setup of the team from your ability to do the optimal definition or the optimal tracking of your SLOs. The more those are aligned, frankly, the easier the exercise becomes. But the way we've built the Sumo technology does not require a change to how you're set up. Does not require, hey, you got to have team A and team B. It's all about normalizing the data together and then transcending that to provide the solution.
Do I need to hire something that looks like a site reliability engineer to achieve this, or can I achieve this with my own squad as is per se? I just have to kind of, reorientate the team.
My strong belief here, and I say belief because it's not backed up with as much data as I would like it to just yet, but we are definitely seeing that trend, is that this is one of those things that's more of a in place versus additional types of approaches or directions. And I'll explain, right? When you want to build something that, like a mobile app, that's not in place. You got to have experts. You got to have people who know a new technology. You got to have people who know mobile around them in a global setting. That requires additional capabilities. The way we've built reliability management does not require additional subject matter expertise. So that's one. Two, once people adopt and customers adopt this idea of error budget monitoring, that comes with less effort on overall general monitoring. That comes with less manual effort of calculating SLOs. That comes with less manual effort of alerting based on those calculations. So what we're seeing, again, as a trend is that this is an in-place accelerator for you to support reliability at scale with the same staff you have and with the same expertise that you already have in-house.
Do you think that we're reaching a level of complexity that we're going to need some help from AI and algorithms, but the question has always been, to what degree can you rely on them, or what is the state of our collective machine intelligence that we can employ and rely on today versus where you think it might be tomorrow?
I think we passed the line of not relying on AI. The collection, the pattern recognition, the anomaly detection, the log deduplication. We're talking about terabytes of logs coming in every hour sometime, and there's no way to keep up without AI. So we've crossed the line of being able to do these things without AI a while back. In terms of accuracy, in terms of what AI brings to the table, I think AI today is implemented in DevOps and sort of what I would categorize as safe areas. Well tested, well known. I think once we start, and we will, trying to push the bleeding edge and say, you know what? We'll define your SLOs for you. Sorry, we'll define your SLIs for you. We'll create SLOs on top of them. We'll start predicting where error budget is going. I think that's where we're going to have a lot more checks and balances, because the AI we're now implementing is specific to reliability management or SLO management in this case, and not other aspects already true and tested with other areas or true and tested technologies or models that have been put in place. I think the more we do in AI, the more reliable we'll become. I think the more we do with AI, the more we're able to scale. And the more we do with AI, we end up having humans taking really a decision-making role, taking really a role of, hey, what are the most important things to prioritize and go after, and really rising above the noise of multiple alerts and billions of data points to that decision-making place where we want to have those subject matter experts spend most of their time.
So do you think we'll get to the point where I might walk into the office and there'll be a speech-assisted message from a machine telling me, "Danger, Will Robinson, you're about to be fired for these 3 things unless you fix this immediately"?
I hope the machine speaks nicer than that. I do hope. Sorry, I'm pretty sure we're going to get there. Yes, I'm pretty sure we're on track to get there, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of manual tasks done today, pattern-oriented and repetitive tasks done today, with the help of AI, get more and more automated. Note, I'm not saying that takes the human out of the loop. On the contrary, it puts the human and the key parts of the loop. It helps us free the time from the repetitive, the pattern, the automated. It helps reduce the amount of errors that happen when people do things manually. And with the right checks and balances, helps create a much better solution. I would say, in the area of AI in general, this whole idea of compliance, of fairness, of explainability, those are key general purpose AI capabilities that allows us to pressure test AI-powered solutions to make sure they are fair, to make sure they can be explained. The machine chose A, why did it choose that? A machine chose to speak in a certain manner to me and in a different manner to you. Is that a fair statement, or are the machines not being fair? Those generally applicable capabilities in AI would also apply here. So I think we need them. I think the interaction with humans is definitely an area of friction, but I think we're seeing that in the industry. There's no resistance to it. It's just a matter of what's the right way to bring that in.
All right, so let's pull it all together. We're focused on reliability. We have more observability. We're going to have more AI augmented help. Do you think IT as a job will get fun again? Because frankly, in the last few years, to your point, there's been a lot of drudgery.
I think IT has a very different future than where we are today. I think it's about more and more about critical business decision making. I think, these ideas we always talk about, hey, let's connect the line between our containers in K8 somewhere on the cloud and how the business is doing. I think since we're able to do more and more than that, then I'm having a problem with the fun statement, because some people find what I just said like a ton of fun. That's still going to be around. But I think sort of the high level business view of things, the control point that IT will become is a whole different ballgame than it is today. I think IT riding on these technologies will rise to the occasion and have a place in the decision-making process. One last note about that in the context of AI. I had a great discussion with a colleague the other day around blockchain and the ability to use blockchain for really automating trusted decision-making and processes. And when you think about IT, there are a lot of processes, there's a lot of decision-making, and there's a lot of trust that needs to come into the system. So I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of technologies like blockchain coming into our space. And, on that front, I could say IT is going to become a lot more fun when we get to bring that kind of technology to help with these critical issues for the business.
All right, folks, regardless of your definition of fun, IT is going to be a lot more rewarding. I think we can all agree on that.
Nice.
Ezra, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to speak with you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. We'll be back again tomorrow, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.